Is the global music world witnessing an unimaginable shift in its center of gravity when a legendary British frontman openly admits that two names from South Korea have now become the most sought-after figures in America, precisely at the moment BTS's tour announcement shook the global entertainment industry and left many people silent, questioning, and quietly panicking? That sentence is not merely a sensational opening, but an echo of a reality that in recent days has become increasingly difficult to deny. This wild fact has spread rapidly, layered with whispers, fragments of interviews, and interpretations that have made global music observers furrow their brows. Chris Martin, a figure who has stood at the heart of Western pop rock music for decades, finally acknowledged something that fans had previously only dared to discuss in comment sections and online forums. Jungkook and Taehyung are the two most searched for names in America right now, not only by fans but by the industry itself. This acknowledgement surfaced right after the announcement of the BTS tour, a moment that feels far too coincidental to be dismissed as chance and far too significant to be considered mere polite praise. Since the BTS tour announcement was released to the public, the atmosphere of the global entertainment industry has shifted dramatically. Search numbers have surged, tickets have become a cross-generational topic of conversation, and American media, usually selective in its focus, has begun directing its spotlight toward two figures who seem to possess a unique magnetic pull. Jungkook and Taehyung are no longer mentioned merely as members of BTS, but as individual entities with strong economic, cultural, and emotional appeal. This is where Chris Martin's admission feels like a key unlocking a truth that had long been tightly sealed. What is really happening behind the scenes in America? Why are these two names described as the most sought after, and sought by whom exactly? Is this simply about ticket sales? Or is there a far more complex and surprising dynamic at play? When a musician of Chris Martin's stature speaks, the world understands that his words are not weightless. He has witnessed waves rise and fall, from the CD era to streaming, from modern Beatlemania to the explosive rise of K-pop. Yet this admission feels different, as if he is marking a historical turning point. In industrial terms, the phrase "most sought after" carries a meaning far beyond ordinary popularity. It encompasses the interest of promoters, record labels, major brands, mainstream media, and even cultural institutions eager to associate themselves with relevance. Jungkook and Taehyung stand at the intersection of all these interests. Following the BTS tour announcement, interview requests skyrocketed, collaboration proposals poured in, and speculation about their individual appearances in America intensified. Some analysts have even begun to pose a bold question. Is America preparing a new stage on which these two stars will stand at the center? What makes this situation even more emotional is its timing. The BTS tour announcement is not merely a concert schedule. It symbolizes the return of a collective force that had been fragmented by time, solo projects, and other obligations. Yet instead of conversations focusing solely on BTS as a group, public discourse has narrowed in on these two names. Jungkook, with a global aura that flows effortlessly across languages and genres, and Taehyung, whose artistic charisma often makes cameras seem to fall in love with him. This combination creates a fascinating tension between collectivism and individuality, a theme now widely dissected by pop culture scholars. Chris Martin, in his admission, did more than praise. He seemed to confirm a phenomenon that had long been felt, but not yet validated by a Western figure with such undeniable credibility. Many wonder what he has seen. Has he witnessed firsthand how the names Jungkook and Taehyung are spoken in American industry meetings? Or has he personally felt the shift in energy among audiences, media, and business players when those two names enter the conversation? Subtle clues have begun to surface. American media, typically cautious, is now using superlative language without hesitation. Major brands are racing to secure associations. Even before the tour begins, discussions about economic and cultural impact are already filling academic spaces. Jungkook and Taehyung are being positioned not merely as artists, but as transnational phenomena, forcing America to reflect and acknowledge that the center of pop innovation is no longer exclusively Western. Here, fan emotion blends with cold industrial analysis. For ARMY, this acknowledgement feels like a long-awaited validation. But for the American industry, it is a loud alarm. Are they ready to accept the reality that two Korean artists are now the most coveted commodities in their own market? Will this change how America views K-pop, not as a temporary trend, but as a foundational pillar of global popular culture? Perhaps the greatest surprise lies in the quiet reaction of industry players. Rather than denying it, many have chosen silence, a silence that paradoxically strengthens the belief that Chris Martin's words are not exaggeration. In a highly competitive world, silence often means unspoken agreement. Jungkook and Taehyung, with their different cultural backgrounds, now hold narrative power in a market long known for its dominance. The deeper the story is examined, the clearer it becomes that the BTS tour announcement was merely a trigger. The real fire has been burning for some time. America, with all the complexity of its entertainment industry, is now in a phase of adaptation. Jungkook and Taehyung are not being sought after simply because they are popular, but because they represent the future. A future in which global identity is fluid, language is no longer a barrier, and collective emotion can be ignited by two figures who understand the power of storytelling, performance, and artistic sincerity. Will this lead to a new form of dominance? Or is this merely a temporary peak of a much larger wave? These questions continue to linger, creating a narrative tension that makes it hard for the public to look away. Each day, without answers, only heightens curiosity. Every new comment, no matter how small, is analyzed, twisted, and treated as a clue. In the end, this wild fact is not just about Chris Martin's admission. It is a mirror of changing times. Jungkook and Taehyung, now the most sought-after names in America, stand as symbols of a new era in which music, identity, and cultural power are being renegotiated. And right after the BTS tour announcement, the world is forced to acknowledge that something enormous is unfolding, something that may reshape the global entertainment map forever. The question now is no longer whether this admission is true, but how far its impact will spread. Is America ready to accept this reality? Is the industry prepared to share the stage? Or is this only the beginning of even more revelations, waiting for the perfect moment to shake the world once again? And yet, as the echoes of that admission continue to ripple outward, a deeper layer of intrigue begins to surface, one that goes beyond headlines and viral quotes and moves into the uncomfortable territory of structural change. Because when figures like Jungkook and Taehyung become the most sought after in America, the implications are not limited to fandom enthusiasm or social media metrics. They touch the very architecture of how global pop stardom is defined, manufactured, and sustained. Behind closed doors, the American music ecosystem operates on forecasts, leverage, and long-term positioning. Tours are not merely performances, they are economic engines. The announcement of the BTS tour immediately activated these engines, but what startled many insiders was the disproportionate gravitational pull toward Jungkook and Taehyung. Conversations that were expected to revolve around the group as a whole began to pivot, subtly but unmistakably, toward these two figures. It was as if the industry itself was asking a quiet but dangerous question: what happens if the future of global pop can be anchored by individual artists who were never meant to follow Western templates? This is where the emotional tension sharpens. Jungkook represents a kind of universality that America has always claimed as its own domain. His voice moves easily across genres, his image adapts without dilution, and his presence feels instantly familiar even to audiences encountering him for the first time. Taehyung, on the other hand, disrupts expectation. He does not chase familiarity. He bends it. His artistry feels deliberate, sometimes enigmatic, and often resistant to easy categorization. Together, they form a paradox that American pop culture finds both irresistible and unsettling. The timing of Chris Martin's acknowledgement intensifies this unease. As a collaborator, observer, and veteran of global superstardom, his words carry subtext. He has seen what happens when artists transcend markets and become movements. When he speaks of Jungkook and Taehyung being the most sought after in America, he is not merely describing demand. He is pointing toward influence. Influence over taste. Influence over direction. Influence over what the next decade of global music might sound and look like. There is also a quieter, more emotional undercurrent running beneath this phenomenon, one that fans sense instinctively. Jungkook and Taehyung are not just being watched, they are being projected onto. In a fragmented cultural moment, audiences are hungry for figures who feel authentic yet aspirational, vulnerable yet powerful. The announcement of the BTS tour reopened that emotional channel, reminding the world of what collective anticipation feels like. But it also highlighted how certain individuals carry that anticipation more intensely than others. American media narratives have begun to reflect this shift. Language has changed. Descriptions have grown more reverent, more speculative, almost cautious. There is a noticeable effort to contextualize Jungkook and Taehyung not as novelties from abroad, but as central players in a shared cultural future. This rhetorical adjustment is not accidental. It signals recognition, perhaps even concession, that the old boundaries no longer apply. What remains unspoken, however, may be the most revealing part of this story. The industry rarely announces its anxieties out loud. Instead, it responds through action, accelerated negotiations, strategic silence, sudden openness to collaborations that once seemed unlikely. The surge of interest following the tour announcement suggests that many stakeholders are racing not just to participate, but to position themselves correctly before the landscape settles into a new normal, and that new normal feels closer than ever. Jungkook and Taehyung are no longer framed as future potential. They are treated as present forces. The search for them in America is not merely digital or logistical. It is conceptual. America is searching for how to place them within its own narrative without losing control of that narrative. That tension is palpable, and it fuels the ongoing fascination. As this story continues to unfold, the questions only grow heavier. Will the BTS tour become the definitive proof point of this shift, the moment historians later identify as the crossing of a line? Or will it be remembered as the catalyst that exposed truths already long established, but rarely acknowledged? Either way, the emotional weight of this moment cannot be ignored. What is clear is that Jungkook and Taehyung stand at the center of a conversation far larger than themselves. They embody a recalibration of cultural power, one that challenges assumptions about origin, language, and legitimacy. Chris Martin's admission did not create this reality. It illuminated it. And once illuminated, it becomes impossible to look away. The world now watches, not just to see what Jungkook and Taehyung will do next, but to observe how America responds when the most sought-after figures on its own stage arrive from somewhere else, carrying with them a future that refuses to ask for permission. The silence that follows such moments is rarely empty. It is filled with calculation, with anticipation, with a quiet reshuffling of priorities that only becomes visible in hindsight. As Jungkook and Taehyung continue to dominate conversations in the wake of the BTS tour announcement, America's response feels less like resistance and more like careful observation, as if the industry is measuring not whether this shift is real, but how permanent it might be. What makes this moment particularly charged is the way it blurs lines that once felt immovable. For decades, the American market positioned itself as the ultimate destination, the final proving ground where global artists either assimilated or faded. Yet Jungkook and Taehyung arrive without the need to assimilate. They do not ask to be translated into something else. Instead, the market bends toward them, adjusting its language, its expectations, and even its definitions of success. That inversion unsettles long-standing assumptions, and it explains why the term most sought after carries such a sharp edge. There is also an emotional reckoning taking place among audiences who grew up believing that global stardom had a specific face, sound, and origin. Seeing Jungkook and Taehyung occupy this space forces a reconsideration of what familiarity means. Their appeal does not rely on erasing difference, but on embracing it. This is not just a triumph of fandom power. It is a cultural negotiation happening in real time, broadcast through charts, ticket queues, and relentless media coverage. As the BTS tour draws nearer, each update feels amplified. A simple mention becomes a headline. A passing comment turns into analysis. Even absence is interpreted as intention. Jungkook and Taehyung move through this landscape with a calm that contrasts sharply with the frenzy around them, and that contrast only deepens the fascination. It suggests confidence, not arrogance, and understanding that the moment speaks for itself. Chris Martin's acknowledgement continues to reverberate because it aligns with what many insiders sense but hesitate to articulate. When a figure of his stature confirms that these two names are the most sought after in America, he effectively bridges the gap between perception and reality. His words legitimize a shift that fans felt emotionally and that the industry now confronts strategically. What lies ahead remains deliberately unclear, and perhaps that uncertainty is part of the power. Jungkook and Taehyung are not rushing to define the narrative. They allow it to form around them. In doing so, they expose the limits of prediction in an era where cultural influence moves faster than institutional response. The BTS tour will not simply be a series of concerts. It will be a live experiment, testing how far this recalibration has already gone. In the end, this story is less about a single admission or a single tour, and more about a threshold being crossed. America is no longer just a gatekeeper. It is a participant in a global conversation where authority is shared, contested, and reshaped. Jungkook and Taehyung stand at that threshold, not as anomalies, but as evidence that the future of global music has already arrived. And as the lights prepare to rise on the BTS tour, one truth grows increasingly difficult to deny. The world is not merely watching BTS return. It is watching how an entire industry responds when the most sought-after figures in its own market redefine what power, relevance, and global stardom truly mean.